Over the entire existence of our civilization, countless myths, legends, and simple stories have been created. They were created for various reasons, and we will talk about that a bit later. But have you ever wondered what kind of influence this has had on us? On technology, on culture, on geographical and geological discoveries, and on science as a whole? I'll be honest, when I was preparing the material for this episode, I was surprised time and time after time, and I am happy to share this information with you.
Today you will find out why stories about dragons collected from all over the globe are so similar, and is that actually true? Why did people believe in all of this so unconditionally? Who in ancient times needed to embellish, invent, and spread such legends so much? And, most importantly, why? Why, without these myths, we might not have survived to the present day? What scientific discoveries were made thanks to ancient myths? And what science deals with this? Where did the legends about dragons breathing fire come from? And how the popularity of dragon stories served the development of IT technologies. Dragons in the legends of all peoples are similar. Or are they? This block could actually be stretched out for more than an hour by analyzing every single legend. But since that isn't the main topic of the video, we will quickly run through some representatives of the dragon family. The Colchian dragon. The name of the dragon itself is usually not mentioned, but one can encounter the name Colchis. It guarded the Golden Fleece while sitting by an oak in Colchis. The Wawel dragon. A terrifying dragon that lived in a dark cave near the Vistula River. In Krakow, there is even a statue of this dragon. By the way, according to their legends, the dragon died very stupidly. He was fed 3 roasted sheep stuffed with sulfur and spices. After eating them, he became very thirsty, and after drinking half the river, he burst. Longwang, the Dragon King. A representative of Chinese mythology and another owner of a statue located in the Longwang Miao Temple. The Lord of the Waters, who, according to legends, was much larger than other dragons and was about 500 meters long. However, as I understand it, Longwang is a status, not a name. There are 4 Longwangs in total. Guande for the East Sea, Guanjun for the West, Gongzi for the North, and Guanli for the south. Dan Dan. A mythical sea monster often described as a huge serpent or dragon, though in primary sources it was more often described as a giant fish, and over time, the version of a giant snake or dragon became more common. According to legends, besides its strength as a massive monster, it is also capable of causing storms and tempests that can destroy entire ships and even small cities. Some legends say its body is covered in golden scales, and when it moves, it could blind those who see it. But surprisingly, it is believed that Dan Dan is very wise and capable of revealing secrets about the past, present, and future to those who dare to travel into its depths. Basilisk. I think many of you right now, myself included, thought, wait, isn't the basilisk a giant serpent? But it turns out that isn't the case everywhere. For example, the Lusatians believed that the basilisk was a rooster with dragon wings and a lizard's tail. I don't know about you, but I feel like the video is starting to dive too deep into the mythical world of dragons. So let's quickly look at images of a few more dragons and move on. Well, what do you say? Are dragons similar to each other? While gathering this information, I noticed a strange pattern. The fresher the source, the more the dragons look alike. The influence of mass culture has heavily templatized all the stories, and that's why now, when looking at one legend, you can find completely dissimilar images. But personally, I can mostly divide them into several types: deities, huge serpents, and huge lizards, both terrestrial and underwater. Don't think I'm a skeptic. I would sincerely love to find at least something in this world that would truly prove that our world is much more interesting than the modern human typically believes. I'll be glad if you suggest topics in the comments where I might find what I'm looking for by studying them. Why did people believe in all of this so unconditionally? And who benefited from the people believing it? Why did people believe in all these legends and pass them down through generations? For most, these weren't just stories, but real facts. The traditions of peoples were built around these stories. For a modern person, believing in something without evidence is doubtful, but in times when there was no way to take a photo or consult other sources, the words of an authoritative person were not questioned. Otherwise, people would have nothing to believe in. Of course, there was physical evidence too. We will return to that in the next block. For most small tribes, the most authoritative storytellers were the best of the hunters. No one could check their words, yet the survival of the entire tribe depended on them. When an authoritative hunter said, "I saw something huge, scaly, and breathing heat over there," no one even thought to doubt it. Even though the broken telephone effect worked differently back then compared to our time, we'll return to this in a bit. As they passed through generations, the stories changed, and over time, a hunter story about a huge snake turned into a story about the greatest warrior of our tribe and how he encountered a huge, scaly, flying monster capable of blowing away the entire village with one flap of its wings, while mighty rivers dried up from its breath. Stories didn't just appear out of nowhere. Often, stories about monsters appeared after tragedies, and vivid legends helped convey information and help people remember it. What would be easier to remember? "Don't go to that mountain, it's dangerous," or "According to the legends of our tribe, the greatest hunter met a terrifying monster taller than the trees. Every warrior sent to catch the beast never returned. And now, for 100 years, thanks to our prayers, the gods keep the monster in its lair." With such a delivery, even a child will easily remember once boring tribal rules. And I think everyone agrees that people in general are inclined to remember something extraordinary much more strongly than something ordinary. And over the entire time the human species has existed, many stories were told, but only the most vivid ones were remembered. Of course, before the advent of writing, and even after the advent of writing, I wouldn't say anything changed drastically. These stories passed through dozens of generations. Surely nothing of the real first version of the story remained. Probably every dragon legend started with a simple story about an ordinary little snake. Often, when talking about the oral form of transmitting information, people cite broken telephone as an example. Like, imagine you pass a story through 10 people. What happens to the story? But it's not quite correct. One cannot deny that people then and people now are different people. We are quite different from the people of those times. For a long, long time, the only important thing for people was to remember and preserve vital information. For us, however, this is no longer nearly as important. We can simply write information down or Google it at the right moment. But when your life, the life of your family, and the life of your people depend on your ability to remember information, that is a completely different situation. The broken telephone effect was present in any case, but truly important information was passed down through generations. Perhaps it is only thanks to such stories and the belief in them that we still exist as a species at all. It is important to consider that because of the importance of maintaining information integrity, one could even be banished from settlements for an incorrect retelling of important things, as it could put people's lives at risk. Therefore, while stories were distorted, it was either not as much as one might think, or it was done intentionally. Just as parents scare children with monsters so that children go to bed earlier, tribal leaders, along with the elders, poured fuel into the fire of important legends. It was an effective way to keep the tribe from dangerous decisions, ill-considered journeys, and going outside the safe territory.
In this block, I wanted to analyze a few more phenomena related to human psychology. For example, that such legends are excellent social glue, without which large communities simply wouldn't form. But these are important topics that shouldn't be cut off mid-sentence, so perhaps we will analyze this in more detail in one of the future videos.
People couldn't have believed in this without evidence, right? Geomythology. Telling a story so well that everyone believes it without a single piece of evidence, and for many generations at that, is a practically impossible task. People back then didn't just believe in the existence of dragons, they were convinced that they lived alongside them and were simply glad they didn't meet them in person. Dragons were a reality for them, a reality that could literally be touched. Clues that could be touched with hands, measured with steps, and even tasted. Finding a tooth the size of a palm in a cave, or seeing a mountain that literally breathes flames. No one thought to wait for the invention of paleontology. Everyone simply automatically called it by the name the whole tribe already knew. Welcome to the world of geomythology. This is a science that doesn't look for fairy tales in reality, but looks for pieces of reality in fairy tales. Here we need to dive back into the world of dragon lore for a bit. One of the first dragons is considered to be Surush, a dragon from Sumero-Akkadian mythology. Translated from Akkadian, its name literally means splendid serpent. It is depicted on the Ishtar Gate in Babylon, but in fact, archaeologists have an opinion that it was sketched from the remains of ancient lizards, or even a simple monitor lizard. But some scientists, like Robert Koldewe, believed it was a cryptid, a real but unknown animal, or a hybrid mythical creature. One of the most impressive representatives of the dragon world is Leviathan, a dragon of the underwater world who was of quite impressive size. Leviathan, like Surush, belongs to dragons whose existence can be confirmed that something similar truly existed on the planet, and not just in legends. Scientists suggest that the prototype for this dragon was an ancient sperm whale that lived in marine waters 13 million years ago.
The remains were found in November 2008 in the Pisco Formation in Peru. The size of just one skull reached 3 meters. And how could you not imagine a giant dragon then? One can notice that all dragons were more like sea serpents, only larger and 100 times scarier. Some scientists link this to the fact that ancient peoples found whale skeletons. Giant extinct crocodiles also fit the role of a dragon prototype. They lived in swamps and ordinary rivers, and sometimes even hid in the forest. Such crocodiles also traveled along the Nile to Egypt and Greece.
And I'll be honest, if I saw the skeleton of, for example, prehistoric pterosaurs as a child, even if I had been told before that dragons don't exist, I would have definitely decided that everyone was just trying to hide the truth, or was afraid to admit it. And to conclude this block, let's look at a few more stories related to finds and then move on to fire-breathing dragons. In the town hall of Klagenfurt, a dragon skull was on display, supposedly killed before the city's foundation in 1250, but it was later revealed that the skull belonged to an extinct woolly rhinoceros. In fact, You can't even imagine how many times people found skeletons of large animals and believed they had found confirmation of a real dragon. Fine, we've sorted that out. But I think one of the most interesting facts is the ability of dragons to breathe fire. How can this even be explained? Fossilized remains and the bones of ancient animals won't help here. In ancient times, fire was considered sacred and dangerous. If it appeared on its own, without human involvement, it could only mean one thing: a supernatural creature was nearby. Are you familiar with Mount Yanartosh? On the slopes of this mountain, fire has been coming out of crevices for millennia. Now we have a scientific explanation. Methane seeps through metamorphic rocks. The gas contains rare elements that cause it to ignite upon contact with air. And of course, this can't be mistaken for a fire-breathing creature. Or can it? It was here that the legend of the Chimera was born. A creature with a lion's head and a dragon's tail that breathes fire. Now the most interesting part. The legend says the hero Bellerophon drove it underground, and for the people, these fires were the breath of the defeated but still living monster. Do you see? People saw a mountain with flames bursting from its cracks, and around this, an entire legend of a fire-breathing and already defeated creature was born. Another myth that has even spread in cinema: before a dragon appears, the smell of sulfur appears in the air. This was even mentioned in The Hobbit. This myth was actively spread in Iceland, New Zealand, and Japan. But in reality, the smell of sulfur came from hot springs and geysers. For example, in Japan, it was believed that dragons often live in hot springs or volcanic lakes. The steam rising above the water is their breath, and the bubbling water is a sign of their rage. And this myth eventually spread all over the world. And how do you explain that dragons knew how to fly? If bones are the body of the dragon, and geysers and other chemical reactions are its breath, then what was mistaken for its ability to fly? Of course, bones showing the presence of wings played some role, but people actually described the process of dragons arriving. Mainly, it was said to be something very bright, fiery, making a terrible roar, crackling, etc. What could people actually see at that moment? The most common version among scientists is that these were meteorites and comets. For better understanding, it is important to consider that back then, there were no electric light sources, and therefore all bright cosmic phenomena were especially impressive.
A tailed comet looks in the night sky like a long, writhing body with a bright head. It moves slowly over the course of several weeks, making it look like a creature swimming in the sky. In ancient China, comets were called pest stars or dragon tails. It was believed that a dragon flies across the sky to warn the emperor of changes. The flight of a bright body across the entire sky is the perfect prototype for the serpent encircling the world. And if we talk about a bolide, an extremely bright meteor, when it enters the atmosphere, it leaves a smoky trail, sparks, roars, and sometimes explodes. And this is an extremely frequent description of a dragon's appearance. I hope you are ready to move on to our last block. The domino effect, from the cave to Silicon Valley. We are used to thinking that games and movies are just entertainment. In reality, the human thirst to see a real dragon on screen has forced engineers to make impossible leaps in technology. The first case where a CGI character, the dragon Draco, had to fully act and show emotion was in Dragonheart in 1996. To translate Sean Connery's facial expressions to a scaly muzzle, the studio had to invent new facial animation systems. And to make Smaug's scales in The Hobbit look realistic, complex light simulation algorithms, subsurface scattering, were created,
which simulate how light penetrates through skin and reflects off gold. These same rendering and physics simulation technologies are now used in medicine, organ visualization, architecture, and the design of self-driving cars. We learned to model the real world because we really wanted to realistically draw a fictional one. People started getting better and better at depicting what was in their heads on the screen, and this, in turn, moved the entire industry and attracted more and more money into it. And where there is more money, there is more development.
For every new product related to the world of fantasy, it is possible to attract a larger budget. The huge budgets of these projects flow into the hands of programmers, artists, and developers. This also affects the development of hardware. The more people want to see dragons, the more powerful video cards become. And those same video cards that render dragons in 4K are training neural networks and driving AI today. Dragons literally sponsored the technological boom. Of course, not alone, but dragons influenced it more than anything else. The development of technology also brought new people into sciences not directly related to technology. Millions of children around the world were able to see impressive films and games in their childhood. As a result, this sparked interest in history in thousands of them, and hundreds went into paleontology. Any dreamy child today is a potential world-turning discovery tomorrow. In the past, the dragon was an explanation for a thunderstorm. Today, dragons for us are black holes, quantum physics, or artificial intelligence. Everything that we don't yet fully understand and that scares us. We continue to create myths so as not to be so afraid of the unknown. And as long as we do this, we develop.
This is my first YouTube video, and I would be very happy if you left an honest comment that will help me in improving the quality of my content. Thank you so much for watching the video to the end. I promise that with every video, everything will get cooler and cooler. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.